everybody. In this 20-minute session here, we're going to look at purple teaming your incident response capability. And really what we're trying to do here is extend the adversary emulation and red teaming to our incident response, whether that's a full-time team within a large enterprise or even security analysts or individuals that have a responsibility for conducting incident response within their organizations. Before we get into it, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Jerry Johansson. I'm a principal incident handler at Red Canary. I work within Red Canary developing detection and response solutions. And one of the things that we've been working on recently and have had a focus on is really enabling incident response teams, not so much at that annual tabletop exercise level, but really at the atomic level, focusing on immediate actions and things that they can do to limit the impact of an incident or work better pivoting from detection into response. Prior to my time at Red Canary, I've been in the industry about a decade, and prior to that, I spent 10 years in law enforcement, working at the state and federal level, investigating cybercrimes. And I am based out of Rapid City, South Dakota. So if you're ever up here to see Mount Rushmore or maybe the Sturgis Biker Rally, that's where I am. So why do we need to do this? Why do we need to incorporate purple teaming into incident response? Well, threat actors are moving faster. We're now looking at ransomware cases that went from maybe a week to 10 days now to several hours for them to get to full impact. We also see that the adversary TTPs, those tactics, techniques, procedures, are constantly changing. And one of the other aspects of this is we often look at purple teaming stops at detection. If we can detect an attack, we stop right there. We say, okay, that was a good validation of our detective and preventive controls. But we often lose an excellent training opportunity to extend our ability to respond from that detection just by the mere fact that we blocked it. As I said at the very beginning, incident response teams, they're heavily reliant on maybe annual training, whether they go to a 5-day boot camp or they conduct that internal tabletop exercise. That's insufficient now. As I said, with the TTPs constantly changing and threat actors moving faster and faster, the IR team, whether that's a full-time team or individuals that are tasked with responding to positive detections, they need constant training. Here's the advantage though. Purple teaming exercises, whether we look at a small or a large, provide those detection and artifacts. So what we want to do is incorporate incident response into every scale or every level of our purple teaming. So we're going to go ahead and look at this as kind of where these fit in inside of a spectrum of purple teaming. So we look at atomic purple testing, and that's going to kind of be our focus for the remainder of this. We won't spend too much time on it, but atomic purple testing is something that we can conduct very quickly and with very little in terms of time and even resources. As you see, we're really only focused on time. It really is only time that we need here. And what we are doing is executing specific techniques and then detection and response activities with those techniques. So if we start to move out, we have adversary emulation. This is where we see automated tools such as Scythe, some of the other ones that actually will put together a kill chain and several TTPs. From there, the IR team should be able to execute plans or playbooks in that construct. Next, we move into penetration testing. And as we see, we're starting to talk about more time and resources in terms of money to get these types of exercises built into the organization. In this case, with the penetration test, we're testing detective and preventive controls, also our vulnerability management processes against internal and external attack sources. This gives us, from the IR perspective, the ability to go through the entire life cycle. So, for example, if somebody's able to execute a good penetration test into the organization, they're able to compromise a system and maybe do some data exfil along with putting into scheduled tasks and some other persistence mechanisms. We can go through and look at containing that, removing those persistent mechanisms and recovering from a realistic scenario versus just seeing if we could detect them or not. The most expensive and most time intensive is obviously our red team exercises. This is where we're going to engage a firm that is going to mimic an adversary and attempt to execute a real world across the spectrum kill chain and try to break into and mimic that adversary. What I would say is those red team exercises from a purple team standpoint, we're using that to validate our training and exercises from detection and all the way from detection to post-incident activity. So if we look at this, this is a really spectrum of different types of testing that we can conduct that the incident response team should be able to take part in. As I said, we're going to focus on that atomic purple testing and look at a construct that allows us to drill this from an atomic level. So as I said, we're really focused on a specific maybe technique and how we would respond to it. The mantra that you're going to hear and we're going to look at is alert, collect, analyze, and pivot. So as we go through this, think of that as this is what at the atomic level we want to incorporate. We can place in realistic threat actor behavior. We can go from detection into response. So that's one of the key ingredients here is taking that detection and not just saying, hey, we can detect this behavior and maybe block it, but what happens if we couldn't? Let's really purple team our response there. Again, we're focused on immediate actions. Here's the best thing about these drills is they're short duration, 10 to 30 minutes in length. And we're actually going to demo one and to show you how quickly you can test some of your plans and playbooks or even just your response to some of these alerts. So the big thing, what are we drilling? All right. So we're going to look at maybe suspicious file downloads, maybe suspicious file execution. Conditions. What are the parameters of the test? All right. We want to set these beforehand to really kind of get some training value out of that. So you receive an alert and have access to the enterprise EDR tool capability. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to accomplish maybe extracting a file. So in this case, keep these in mind because this is what we're going to actually pivot. So our task here is go get a suspicious pivot from a suspicious file download using EDR capability and extract the file and determine what was downloaded. One of the other key things is technology, right? We don't necessarily need a lot of money or expense. As I said, the atomic purple response drills, very low cost, right? So in this case, we're going to use a standard laptop with atomic red team. We're going to execute an atomic red team task, and that is going to generate a event log entry within the Windows system. And this is going to be forwarded to a Splunk instance with Splunk's universal forwarder. We're going to receive that alert. We're going to look at it. We're going to pivot into the endpoint using a tool called Velociraptor. And then we're going to extract our artifact. And we're going to really look at very, very discrete atomic actions here. So this is an excellent opportunity to train your playbooks. It's an excellent opportunity to test your tools and their capability in how they would respond to this type of situation. And then we're going to analyze those artifacts as part of that. So let's go ahead and pivot into a demonstration here. And what you see right here is our test laptop that I said. And what we're going to do is execute an atomic test that is essentially going to use PowerShell to download a file from an external source. Very common TTP that we see, especially with ransomware cases after that initial infection. So think VBS script executes the PowerShell. PowerShell downloads a secondary payload, and this is all part of that chain. So what you see here is just PowerShell. We're going to use atomic red team, and the atomic test we're going to do is mimicking that miter attack technique T105. And there we go. We've begun our test. So what this test is actually doing is it's using PowerShell to download a file from a bit.ly site. And one of the key aspects of this is maybe have somebody that's a tester, that purple hat that is responsible for doing this, because there are some giveaways. If you're familiar with these tests or if you worked with these tests, you may develop almost an institutional knowledge of what's happening and what are the key takeaways from this. So now we're going to go ahead and pivot into our detection capability. And right here we have a Splunk Enterprise. If you're interested in even replicating this, I will say all of this is done on a home server, or it can even be done on a home laptop. Splunk is free. They have free licenses, and also the tool Velociraptor. So everything you see here, I have not had to spend any money on. It's more time building and configuring these tests to make sure that they will work. So we have our endpoint is feeding in all of these types of logs. One of the things that this type of exercise can do as well is look at how you're sourcing. What are you sourcing and how much data are you able to pull? So for example, all I've done on the laptop that I've configured the atomic red team test is really only 5 sources. Sysmon obviously taking up a large portion of this, but we're actually pulling an application, system and security, and PowerShell operation. So these also serve a useful purpose of really finding out where specific telemetry and what specific data sources provide the best data in order to pivot off of. So remember that we're pivoting off of specific data points and going to collect and actually execute playbooks, plans on those types of alerting. So we're going to go up here and see what triggered alerts we might have. And right here, this is what we were looking at. So our atomic red team execution went and downloaded a file and triggered this alert. So if we look in viewing the results, we can see we've got PowerShell that's downloading this file. Now, one of the key data points that we now have from this alert is the actual file that's downloaded. We see a PowerShell script that is actually downloaded as part of this attack. The challenge for us from an incident response capability is, yes, we know something downloaded from the internet. Now what we have to do is figure out exactly what this file is. Now, there's 2 ways to do it. We could actually go to the bit.ly link, but that's not too much fun. What we want to do is make sure that we can actually extract the PowerShell file from the impacted system remotely. So we're going to go ahead now and pivot into Velociraptor. Velociraptor is an open source tool. It's provided by Rapid7. It is a remote evidence collection and analysis platform and basically runs on a agent and server architecture. So what we can do here is we know what specific endpoint we're looking at here. And we have a general idea, 2 things, what the IP or the URL where the file was downloaded and the actual file name. So if we're looking at this from a purple teaming exercise, we're testing whether or not the playbooks that we're using are able to actually see or actually delineate what we need to do from a workflow perspective, what tools we need to use and what types of queries we may even need to run. In this case, we're going to use something called Velociraptor query language. It's a structured language. And we're actually going to use this type of query. Not to get into the too particulars, if you're interested in Velociraptor, it's probably one of the best tools in terms of documentation. But what we did is extracted that key data point from the alert in Splunk. And we're just going to go see if we can find out where that file is. And here's that system. We see the name of the file, and we identify that it's in JSmith's app data local temp folder. So let's kind of real quick level set where we are. We're pivoting off that detection. All right. Normally this behavior might be stopped in your enterprise, but we were here not so much to test the detection, but also a response capability, which is identifying the location of that file and extracting it. So then we're going to go ahead and see if we can find that. Velociraptor allows you to query the endpoint using the agent, and we can actually look at the file system. So if we're digging into that JSmith account and their app data and their local and going to temp, we can see if we can find that, and there it is. This is our file that we're looking at. Now we're at that meat. Now we've really extended this type of very small purple teaming engagement into actually figuring out what this file is. So we can download the file. And what you have here is a fake file that is supposed to invoke Mimikatz, a credential harvesting tool. So let's look at this real quick, level set one more time. What we've done here is we've executed a realistic scenario, downloaded a file, and we were able to pivot off that detection and actually go ahead and extract artifacts that we can actually use now. Now we have confirmation that we now have an endpoint that may need to be isolated and taken offline and re-imaged. So real quick review is we can extend out this testing to incorporate not only the detections, but as you saw, we can go right into extracting artifacts and making decisions at there. These exercises can be dialed in. We can do these weekly. We can even do these daily if you really wanted to. But the main takeaway is to look at stringing, threats that we know are out there, threats that are very common like this one, and actually test our response to that. These type of regular drills using a purple teaming structure and a purple hat are important. They're really good to make sure that you're keeping up with the adversary and what they're doing and how they're operating. And really, as we saw, this can be done at little to no cost and very little time. We ran through an entire scenario in about 8 to 10 minutes. It may take you a little longer, but you can see that you don't necessarily have to set aside a day or two or a week to get some value out of this purple teaming concept. I want to thank Attack IQ and all of the attendees for the invite and the chance to speak to you. If you have any questions or comments, there's my contact information, and I'd be happy to connect with you if you have any other comments or even questions. So thank you very much.